Let's have a go at creating a Sentence Builders resource. So we're logged in and we need to go to Resources and Create New Resource. And this is the authoring page for creating your own Sentence Builder resources. Okay, so your Sentence Builder content goes here. And this bit here at the top, Sentence Builder content, is where you design the structure for your Sentence Builder, and where you also type or paste in the content that you want to include in each cell in the table. So here we have an open Office Writer document, like a Word document, with a table containing content for a very simple, basic French Sentence Builder, displayed in columns. It's quite typical to present Sentence Builders in this way to students in columns, and it's fairly simple for students to work out how the components to this Sentence Builder fit together. For example, they know that if they start their sentence here with elle s'appelle, meaning she is called, then they're going to continue it with a girl's name, and in column 4 they're going to use elle a, she has, and if they choose for example the number 11, 11, they're going to complete it with the plural version of en, to say 11 years. Now all those kinds of things are very straightforward for the human brain to work out, but when you're dealing with an interactive Sentence Builder, you have to do things slightly differently, because you have to tell the Sentence Builder which options are appropriate and which options aren't. So let's get that content into our Sentence Builder on Sentence Builders, and I'll show you what I mean. So I've started adding the content into the Sentence Builder table. We've got the first 2 columns done. Third column, and we need to then add 3 more columns, one for the parts of avoir, one for the numbers, and one for the word for year or years. I'll pause it while I copy and paste the data into those cells. So now we have the content from the Word document into our Sentence Builder creation tool on Sentence Builders, and you can see, just as with the original version, it's structured in columns, so that the sentences are formed by choosing one item from each column and adding them together. Now obviously, as we said before, it's easy for students to work out how the different components have to fit together, but a computer program doesn't know unless you tell it. And so it's quite easy for us to end up with some pretty nonsense outputs. If we go to scroll down, there's our Sentence Builder. If we scroll down and we verify the content, we can see that we've got nearly 8,000 sentences. But even by the first one, you can see that we have a problem. I am called Adrian and I have 1 year. That's obviously not correct, because it should only work with 1 year. And then we have the next one down, we have 2 year, followed by 2 years, and so on. And you're going to see things like I am called plus a name and he has, and so on. So the vast majority of the outputs from this are going to be incorrect, and we need to tell the Sentence Builder how to function so that it only outputs correct sentences. Those familiar with using Sentence Builders from when it was first launched will remember that originally the only way that you could create your own resources was by making these simple column-based Sentence Builder resources, where all items had to work with all other items. And that's precisely why a Sentence Builder such as this one could never work with the original authoring tool that we had on the site. Now there are all kinds of ways that you can stipulate which sentences are correct and which combinations are incorrect. Even with a column-based resource such as this one in its current state, it is possible to make it work so that it only outputs correct sentences. And the way that you would do that here would be via the word combinations, word exclusions option. So for example, you would have to stipulate that you could not have sentences that included both je m'appelle and tu as, and je m'appelle and il a, and je m'appelle and elle a, and so on. And you'd have to do that for every single incorrect combination. Or alternatively, you could stipulate that if a sentence contains je m'appelle, it must also contain j'ai. So that's another way you could get around it. But you'd have all kinds of problems trying to exclude all of the names as well. So for example, you have to say that if a sentence starts with il s'appelle, or he is called, then it couldn't continue with any of the girls' names, and so you'd have to have a separate exclusion for every one of those names. And similarly, you'd have to stipulate that if the number chosen is 1, then the only way of continuing that is with the word year. So you couldn't have combinations such as 1 years and 3 year. So it is possible to do all those kinds of things using only word-based exclusions, but that's quite a complicated way to go about it, and the sentence builder doesn't look as good as it could do, and it's not the most efficient use of the browser's memory capacity, because it has to do all of those checks before it can generate the sentences. So what we're going to do, rather than using word exclusions, is to look at ways that we can improve the structure of our table and to make it work, to make it look more attractive and to make it work more efficiently. Now, as you can see by looking at a column-based table such as this one, the flow, the way that the table works, is by moving from left to right. So you start here, you choose an item, you move to the next column, you choose an item, and so on. Okay? But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to split up the content so that, for example, our first column, instead of all being together, we're going to have one cell for I, one cell for you, one for he, and one for she. And the way that we do that is we go to our Sentence Builder content table. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the cell that I want to split, and then I'm going to split it vertically. So what that line is doing there is it's a horizontal line, but it splits the cell into 2 separate cells, like that. Okay, so we've made it into 2 separate cells, and we can carry on doing the same thing, and again, until we have our 4 separate cells. And then it's just a matter of going into the cells, copying out the content. I'll do this with each cell. Copy and paste. Okay. So there now we have a different cell for each of our different subject pronouns. And we can do the same thing with our avoir column here. So we can split this one again into 4. And we can do the same as we did before and move the content into the appropriate cells. Okay, so now we have our 4 different cells for the 4 subject pronouns at the start of the sentence, and we also have the same thing for the verb to have, avoir. And if we scroll down and we look at our sentence builder view, that's now what it looks like. Now, we could continue like this, and we could leave all the boys and the girls' names together, as you can see them there in one block. And then we'd still have to include all of those word-based exclusions, so that we could say that we can't use il s'appelle along with the girls' names, and we can't use elle s'appelle along with the boys' names. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to split them into two different cells. So I'll split that one, and it's always splits it at the lowest point that it can, the furthest point. So what we'll do there is we'll split it again, and then we'll merge those two together, and then we'll take our girls' names from here and we'll paste them into the bottom cell. So now we have the boys' names here and the girls' names below, and we have our avoir and we have our s'appeler all split into the correct cells. And now we need to do the same thing, really, because it's the simplest way to do it, with the year and years. So I'm going to split this down here. Again, it always chooses the bottom point, so we're going to do this until we get to the point that we want, and then we can merge those cells together. Merge, and then we can take on from there, and we can put it into this one. And in fact, we're going to do the same with this one as well. Oops. Merge those back together. And from there, I'm going to take everything apart from one, put it in the bottom cell. Okay. So now we have un an and we have deux, trois, just until up to 20 with the plural for years. Now, one thing you can do here is rather than have that as a separate thing, un an, you could just include it as one cell together, so we can merge those. And we've now got them in the same place, so we can change that so it says 1 year. It's just removes an extra clip from the building. Okay, so now we have everything pretty much as we'd like it to be, but there are problems, and the problems we have now are with flow. The flow problem we have is that if we start with je m'appelle or tu t'appelles, and we know that we can only flow from left to right crossing vertical lines, but we can't cross any of the horizontal lines, we can see that with je m'appelle and tu t'appelles we can only continue our sentence with boys' names. Similarly, we can only use the girls' names if we start with il s'appelle and elle s'appelle. We shouldn't be using il s'appelle with any of the girls' names. And also, if you look to the fourth and fifth columns, you can see that j'ai, I have, now only works with un an, because it's the only one that it flows into. And tu as, il a, and elle a can't possibly work with un an because they don't flow into that cell. They only flow into the cell to the right containing all the other numbers. So what we have to do now is we have to add in some an extra column to enable the flow. And I'll show you how we do that. So we can add a column in here between the s'appeler column and the names column. Now it will add a column that contains all the cell divisions from the rest of the table, but all we need to do is select all of those and merge it, and we've now created a vertical column which allows the flow to go, for example, in at je m'appelle, and it can go into the boys' names, but it can also go down here into the girls' names. Similarly, we can go in with il s'appelle here, flow into the next cell, and move up and flow into the boys' names. Okay, and we also need to add the same kind of thing in before all of the numbers. So I'll go to the create a table again, add another column, merge all of the cells, and there we have essentially the structure that I want for our table. Before I go any further, I'm going to change a few things to make it fit nicer. I want this to be less tall, and I want it to be more evenly spaced. So first of all, what we're going to do with this tall numbers column is we're going to divide it into two display columns in the table, and you'll see an immediate change to the way the table looks. Okay, so immediately the table is not as tall, and it looks more evenly spread. And what we can also do is we can change the vertical or horizontal positioning of the translations so that things fit nicer on the page. So we can do that with our bits of avoir, and we can do the same with our bits of s'appeler. Okay, and that's essentially the look that we want for our table. And you'll see a table that looks pretty much exactly the same as that in the premium resources. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to colour code my cells so that they look nicer, and to also give the students a bit of a clue about how things need to fit together. So we've got boys' names, which we'll put in blue, and girls' names, which we'll put in pink. And we'll do the same with il s'appelle, we'll put that in blue, and elle s'appelle we'll put in pink. And we can do the same with il a blue and elle a in pink. And that's really the only colour coding that we need, which is designed to show students how things fit together. We can add other colours as well if we want to, because we want to make it look a bit nicer. So, for example, we can make all of the numbers, all the bits that refer to the years, we can make those yellow, for example. And that's pretty much our finished resource. But now that we've improved the flow of the resource, we've also created another problem, namely that there's nothing to stop il s'appelle now flowing straight into the girls' names, and there's nothing to stop elle s'appelle flowing into the boys' names, and there's still nothing to stop our sentence builder creating sentences which go je m'appelle Corinne et il a 3 ans. We want these cells here to be matched with these cells here. And the way that we need to do that is we need to look at a really cool tool which is in the this section, and it's called SB Roots and Cell Combos. Now, what the SB Roots pop-up does is it shows you another copy of your sentence builder table without the translations, and it shows you all of the roots that exist within your table. So amazingly, there are 64 different roots through that table. If we think about it, we can go here to here to here to here to here to here to here, or we can go to there, and so on. So every different permutation or combination of cells in the table is combined together to make a root. And for this table, there are 64 different roots. And what we need to do is we need to say which roots we're going to allow and which roots we're not going to allow. Now, you can do this on a root by root basis if you like. You can click on the root there and it will show you what you have, and then you can therefore allow or disallow the various roots. But that's quite time consuming because there are so many different roots, and some sentence builder tables you can end up with 100 or more different roots. And to go through each one by one is pretty time consuming and complicated. So the way to do this is to go to the Cell Combos section of the SB Roots and Cell Combos pop-up. And here we have two different sections. We have excluded cell combinations and required cell combinations. We're going to use both of these for this resource, and I'll show you how they work. They work in slightly different ways. Okay, required cell combinations mean, if I click that to start, okay. If my sentence includes je m'appelle, it must also include j'ai, or something from that table, from that cell. Okay, that's one done. And we can do the same for tu t'appelles and tu as. We'll do the same for il s'appelle and il a. And we'll do the same for elle s'appelle and elle a. Because we know that if we start our sentence with je m'appelle, it must continue with j'ai. And if we start a sentence with tu t'appelles, it must continue with tu as, and so on. Now, we can't use the same one for the boys and girls' names. Or rather, we could do, but I'm going to show you the other functionality as well, which is the excluded cell combinations. So this works in a slightly different way because you can include more than 2 combinations. So you have to click on OK to say when you have finished adding your combination. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say that, for example, we're going to exclude any combination where this box mixes with this box. Okay, and then we can click OK to add that combination. And then we're going to do the same with elle s'appelle and the boys' names. And by the way, the issue that we had before with and on and all the different numbers, we've solved simply by splitting them into different cells. Now, having done that, if we go back to our SB Roots tab within that pop-up, you can see that the vast majority of the roots are now disabled, and only the acceptable roots are enabled. And if I quickly show you which ones they are, for example, that bottom one there is elle s'appelle, girl's name, et elle a, and then the ages. And the one before it is the one for 1 year. Okay, everything the same but 1 year. And the next one up is il s'appelle. Il s'appelle, boy's name, et il a, and then the ages, and so on. So now we'll save the changes, and we'll see that, there we go, our SentenceBuilder has a total of 64 roots, of which 12 are currently enabled. Okay. Now, if we were to scroll down now and look at our, click on Verify Now, and it will tell us that we now have only 720 sentences. And now, all of the options should make sense. So let's have a look. Je m'appelle Adrien et j'ai un an. Yeah. So now, je m'appelle can go with boys and girls' names, and all of the different combinations work. Je m'appelle only goes with j'ai, tu t'appelles only goes with tu as, and so on. So that's pretty much our resource finished. We've separated our columns into different cells. We've added empty columns to enable flow, and we've combined content in the top right corner here, and we've added exclusions to define the roots through the table. There are a couple of extra bits that we can do to make the resource work even better. Something that a lot of people neglect to do, if I scroll down here, is the vocab chunks. Now, vocab chunks, unless you define them separately, are defined by what you can see in each cell. So je m'appelle is a chunk, tu t'appelles is a chunk, et is a chunk, il a is a chunk, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're all chunks. Okay, so you can decide yourself how you'd like to do your custom defined chunks, but it is very often a good idea to define them. If you don't do that, then you often end up with single words. So for example, we can decide that we want these combinations to be used as vocab chunks. So we want to say that je m'appelle plus all the boys' names, they will be defined as chunks. We can do the same with tu t'appelles plus all the boys' names, and then we can do the same with je m'appelle plus the girls' names, and tu t'appelles plus the girls' names, and il s'appelle plus the boys' names, and elle s'appelle plus the girls' names. We can leave et as a separate chunk. If you don't define a cell as part of a custom chunk, it will be used anyway. Okay, so et will already be used, and we can say we'd like to do the same with the years as we've done with the names. So we'd like to say j'ai un an is a chunk, and j'ai 2, 3, 4, 5 ans is a chunk, and then the same with tu as, and the same with il a, and the same with elle a. Oops, I've done that the other way around, so let's do the un an, elle a, un an. Okay, and those things, these little blocks that you can see here, they're actually the chunks, and you can click on them so that it will show you where your chunks are in the table and how they've been defined. Okay, and we click on Save Changes to save that, and if we now look in this section, we can see that our vocab chunks have been defined. I am called Adrien, je m'appelle Adrien. Okay, and we scroll down. You are called Isabelle, tu t'appelles Isabelle. You have 18 years, tu as 18 ans. Now, I've chosen to include direct translation of avoir in the table because I think it's quite useful to show students that j'ai 11 ans literally means I have 11 years rather than I am 11. But what you can do as well is you can use the transformations tool to transform the sentences so that in the chunk activities and in the sentence-based activities, any clues or English answers include correct English rather than that directly translated English. And you can do all of that while at the same time keeping the dodgy English direct translation in the SentenceBuilder table. So I'll quickly show you how you could go about doing that using the transformations. Here's our transformation section. We'll click on the View Edit Transformations pop-up, and there are instructions here that tell you how to go about creating transformations. Now, if our aim here is to change it so that instead of saying I have 1 year, it says I am 1, and instead of saying you have 5 years, it says you are 5. They're fairly straightforward transformations to make, and I'll show you how we do that then. Okay. First of all, you notice that in those English sentences that I've just said, we don't actually need the word year or years. So instead of she has 8 years, we just want to say she is 8. Okay. So we're going to get rid of the word year and the word years from our transformed sentences. And the way that we do that is this. Right, I'm going to start with a hashtag, and what that does is it maintains a space. It tells you that you want to remove a space before this word. If I do hashtag year, 2 arrows, and then nothing on the right hand side, that tells me, it tells the program to remove the word year and the space before it and to replace it with nothing. In fact, we'll have to do years first so that we don't end up with an error. Can you work out why that would be? Essentially, if you think about it, if you get rid of the word year, then you're going to still have the S left behind in all those sentences that contain years. So if we remove years first, and then we remove year, it should remove all instances of those 2 words from any of our chunks and sentences. Already, look at the difference it's made. If I save the changes, scroll down here, update my vocab chunks, it now says you have 16, you have 14. Okay, so anything that makes reference to the ages doesn't actually contain the word year or years anymore. She has 1, she has 2. And the same is true of our sentences. I am called Luke and I have 1. And all we need to do now is change it so instead of saying I have 1, it says I am 1. Okay, and we do that in exactly the same way as before. This time, so we can add to our transformations, we're going to say instead of I have, change it to I am. There's no hashtags or anything fancy added in this time because we're not removing any spaces before or after the chunk. I have becomes I am. Oops, I need to make sure it's lowercase. You have becomes you are. He has. I'll start with she again for the same reason as before. She has becomes she is. And he has becomes he is. And if we now click on our Save Changes, we can see that our and we click on Update, we can see that our sentences now say he is 11, he is 13, that's the chunks, that's the vocab chunks. And if we scroll down to our sentences, you can see that I am called Luke and I am 1, you are called, let's scroll down a bit, I am called Adrien and I am 20, je m'appelle Adrien, j'ai 20 ans. So now all of our sentences are correct, the English has been transformed in the way that we've prescribed. And we now have a finished resource. So just to finish off, there we have the display. So that's what it will actually look like in the finished resource on the page, on the screen. We've defined our roots so that only 12 out of the 64 roots work. We've not needed to use word-based exclusions We've added our transformations for the English. Vocab chunks we've defined so that instead of just 13, 14, 15, we have chunks such as elle a 13 ans, j'ai 15 ans, il a 16 ans, etc. And text-to-speech, we've not added a language yet to our resource, so we need to choose our text-to-speech language. Immediately you'll see that having done that, you can click on the French within the table.
Il s'appelle Béatrice. 1 an. 2.
And so on. So the table now speaks. And verify, and it shows us our sentences, and then you need to just decide where you're going to put this.